The outside, there are three, so to speak, different shells of the esrog. And here we're talking about if the outer shell comes off, was peeled off, right? The Mishnah says, I mean, the last thing we talked about yesterday was about, I think we spoke about the pittum, right? The pittum, the top of the esrog, if the pittum came off, we said that will invalidate the esrog, right? We had the halacha if there was this chazazit, these boil type of thin boils grew on the esrog, which we said it had some, we said you could feel it when you run your hand along the esrog, like it's out, it's not if you put your hand through around, on the esrog, you'll actually feel it. We said that if it covers the majority of the esrog, we said it's a problem. And now the Gemara talks about niklaf. Niklaf means that it got peeled. If the outer shell, the thin outer shell of the esrog gets peeled, that it peels off, that will invalidate the etrog. And again, the halacha will discuss exactly, are we talking about, is it that the majority of got peeled off, or that actually everything had to get peeled off? To see what the halacha says, how much peeled off. We're not talking about a small little peel. Small little peel off would not be the issue. Nitzdak, also if the egg gets splits, there's a crack in the esrog. Also, we're talking about a tremendous crack, covering a lot of area of the esrog, like in Siman Tov Reish Mem Ches in the Shulchan Aruch. Now we're turning the page to 34b4. Right. So we're going to talk about the stems coming up. Stay tuned, Ralph. Coming up. So in the Shulchan Aruch, when it talks about the peeling, it says if the whole thing gets peeled, it would invalidate the esrog. But if there is a small amount left, it's kosher, as long as it's not completely peeled. And some say you have to leave the size of a selah coin. If you didn't leave that size of that coin, it would be invalid. So there's different sizes, but it's tremendous amount to be peeled. It's either everything has to be peeled in order to invalidate it, or it's talking about you have to, or 90-something% whatever has to be peeled in order to invalidate it. And we're talking about the peeling the outer skin. It's still you'll still see the esrog. It'll still look yellow. It's not going to lose. It's not taken away from the actual. It's not considered that you're actually taking away from the actual esrog. It's not considered chaser. It's not considered that it's missing from the esrog. Because here it's mission continuous. Nika v'chaser kolshu. But if you made a hole in the etrog, if you run a needle through the etrog, it does not invalidate the etrog. But and we said yesterday that if you did not run the needle through the width of the etrog, if you ran the needle, let's say, through the side of the etrog, that would not invalidate it, since you didn't take away anything from the etrog. But if you made a hole in the etrog and v'chaser kolshu, and you actually any amount of the etrog was removed, missing, that would invalidate the etrog. So here we come on to a new invalidation called chaser. Something is missing. There's something called yavesh, dry, which we said the reason why a dried etrog is disqualified because it's not hadar, it's not beautiful, right? The Torah says creates hadar, and now we're saying a different. We're saying chaser, if it's missing a little bit, is it really not beautiful? So it wouldn't be invalidated if you take a small little anything out from the etrog. It's still beautiful, gorgeous etrog. What's the problem? Because the Torah says lakachtem. Lakachtem says it's the drush is lakach tum. Tum means to be complete. Yaakov ish tum yoshev olim. Yaakov was a person who was complete. Tamim yeh Hashem. You got to be complete with Hashem. Don't start making don't think into the future about certain things, and don't look into what the astrology says. You just do what Hashem wants you to do. Tamim yeh. So tam, and therefore we have a new disqualification called chaser. Something is that's missing. And then with that comes along Ralph's issue is going to come along soon. We're getting ready. But then the Mishnah continues. Olta chazozit al miuto. If this boil like these little boils would come onto these boils, they come as a result of rotting. If it comes on the majority of the etrog, sorry, on the minority. Before we said it will validate if it's on the majority. Here we say, but if it's on the minority, then it would be kosher. Not al ukso. Here's your case, Ralph. If the uke stem, right? We're now on 34b4. Good morning, Mr. Haber. We're on 34b4. You got on top of the page, Ralph? Second line from the top. End of the line. Nital ukso. If the uketz, if the stem where it grows, where it's connected to the tree, if that was removed, if the stem of the etrog was removed, really we got to bring in an etrog to, but everyone knows the stem, the bottom of the, that's the bottom of the etrog is the stem. If you look back on the picture, on 34b3, right-hand corner, all the way in the bottom, right corner. You see that, Ralph? You see the oak. You see the bottom? That's the stem. So if that was removed, if the okitz was removed, or nikev, now, so the okitz was removed. In contrast to the pitum, which is the top of the esrog, this is the bottom of the esrog. So the bottom of the esrog is not as in your face, so to speak, give the expression, as the top of the esrog, right? Therefore, if that ukit was removed, the Mishnah says over here, it would be kosher. We'll have to see how much of the ukit was removed. There is the ukit. What do you say? A slight portion. And the reason why they're saying that is because if the bottom of the etrog, where you cut it from the tree, the ukit also goes into the etrog itself, right? This is the bottom of the etrog. If if you cut the whole, if you remove the whole ukit, not only what's from outside the etrog, the part of the stem that's inside the etrog, then that might be considered you took a part of the etrog, but that part is inside the etrog. So we're talking about the part that's outside the etrog, the piece of wood, right? You know what I'm talking about, everybody? Right? That part of the wood that's outside the etrog, if we call it the tail of the etrog. The tail of the etrog, it would, since he only took the tail of the etrog, that would not invalidate the etrog. In contrast to the top of the etrog. Is that clear, Mr. Havel? Because the top is much more prominent than like someone's head, the head is people, you see the head, you see your face. You don't see your feet so much. You don't look, that's not what you look at so much at the bottom of the person's body as you look at the top. The same thing that's been etrog, that's why there's something called the chotem, the nose. The upper part of the etrog is the most important part of the etrog to be clean. We'll see as we learn more about the upper part of etrog compared to the bottom part of etrog. So then the Mishnah says, if there's a hole, but they do not cause any removal of anything of the etrog, you made a little hole in the etrog, but you didn't take away any piece of the etrog with you. You made a hole, you stuck a needle, someone stuck a needle into the etrog, it is valid, kosher. Now the Mishnah continues. Etrog hakushi. So Rashi learned that etrog hakushi is an etrog that comes from Ethiopia. And the etrog from Ethiopia is black pasul. It is invalid. And why is it invalid? So some commentaries explain because it's not the color of an etrog. It's not. This is not what an etrog looks like. It's not a black. It's yellow, and it lacks the beauty of the fruit. The Torah says creates hadar. It has to be beautiful, and this is not the beautiful fruit. Yoru karti. Now let's go the other. If let's say it's green like leek, a strong green etrog. And sometimes you see an etrog that's pretty green. So the Mishnah states a machloket if it's kosher or not, and the halacha says it's not kosher. You find an extremely green etrog, it's not kosher, and therefore really you should stay in the community, Mr. Haber. Do they take a green etrog or not? What do you see, Mr. Haber? What? Or do you only see yellow? Everyone, people, oh, you see both in the community.
Green, yellow, sometimes the yellow is pink.
Right. Okay. So if you see yellow on it, then that's a good sign. But let's say it's totally green, a strong green. So the issue by the strong green is what the mission is, will that green ever turn yellow? If you would leave that green around for a certain amount of time, if it wouldn't turn yellow, it would seem to be not kosher. Therefore, the Chafetz Chaim says a person should stay away from an etrog that's totally green. Once you see the etrog starting to turn yellow, so then you already that's a good enough sign to say that it would turn yellow. But if the etrog is totally green, how do you know? How do you know it's going to turn yellow? So therefore, according to that, a person should stay away from buying an etrog that's totally green, especially if the green is a very dark green. Because here we have. Oh, what's the issue? Very good. What's the issue? The issue is that this is not the fruit. This is not a complete. It's too premature if it's too green, and if it's too premature, it's not an etrog. It's still it didn't grow to its maturity that it's now. It doesn't have to grow to how as large it could grow. An etrog can grow the longer you keep it on the tree, it will grow larger. But it is a minimum to be considered that you minimum threshold that this is called a fruit, that the fruit is complete. Because Torah says pre-eitz hadar, it's a fruit. Listen, if something is budding, it's not a fruit yet, it's just budding. But the same thing is if it grew a certain amount and it didn't reach amount of a that it's yellow, that it's just totally green and it's not going to turn yellow. A fruit that you picked off the tree that's not, you take a banana, the green banana. The green banana turns yellow with time. Is that correct, everybody? So that's a sign that it has reached. That's a sign that it reached a level of ripeness when you picked it, because the fact that it's going to turn yellow, it's a complete fruit as even when it's green. The banana is a banana. The fact that it's going to turn yellow. We'll use the banana as an example, and therefore the same thing with the etrog. Correct. It's invalid. That's the halacha. And therefore the recommendation is to stay away. Don't stay away from a totally green etrog. Because that totally green etrog, how do you know it's going to turn yellow? You're going to wait till after the holiday, and then maybe it's too late. So,
They still have the black ones today?
so I presume from Ethiopia, or when Rashi says that you'll find this black citrus etrog fruits, and it's invalid. You cannot use it.
What if those were deemed to be beautiful in some other land that we're settling in?
Okay, it could be the way the commentary here says that, like there's a certain established color of an etrog, which is yellow. That seems to be the established color of the etrog. So anything that's not going to turn yellow, see that's not that's not the fruit of that's not the
It's not the right fruit, it's not a beauty issue, it's a species issue.
okay.
Is that what they're saying?
That it's a good question, because what happens if you have you see, if you say it's a lack of beauty, see what Adam is asking, what's the problem with is it a lack of beauty? What'd you say?
You guys have told us.
Right.
That's what
Right.
I'm saying.
Yes, Rashi says, yes.
One of them saying, if the etrog is brought to a country where they're unaccustomed to it, then it's invalid. Because because in this location, it is deemed to be lacking in beauty.
Which note are you reading?
This is 38, the art
38 in the article.
38.
If such an is brought to a country where people are unaccustomed to dark, it's invalid. But it's location. Okay, we're gonna have to see that this is gonna be this Gemara. There's gonna be a Gemara on this. We're gonna get. We'll see. But that's a good point. But and by the way, Mr. Haber, you asked a question yesterday. I did my homework. You asked a question yesterday regarding Ir Hanidachat, a city that most of the people majority of the people went and they worshiped idols. And the Torah says you gotta burn all the stuff in the city, all the movable items in the city have to be burnt. And the Torah says you don't build the city again. You have to leave the city, you can't rebuild the city. But your question was regarding a person living there, subsequently after they burnt the city down. I saw the Minchach to rebuild as a city, Torah says you can't. But perhaps some say there's an opinion that says for a person for a few homes to move there might not be a problem. For a few individual homes, that's not called you rebuilt the place. Just like you go ahead and I presume if you go camping somewhere and you set up a house in the desert, you set out a house in a desolate area, that's not called that you violated, you rebuilt the city. It's just like, it's not called rebuilding a city. It's just like people taking up, sleeping there, setting up a house. So a house or two, it might be allowed a minimum amount of houses, but to actually create a new community, that would be the Torah says, Lo Sibano, you can't rebuild that community. I just wanted to get back to you. The unbelievable, fascinating thing about how the Torah wants to make the mark and the statement to the people. If a majority of the city goes ahead and worships the idols, that city is going to be burned, and the city is not going to be rebuilt. It's a very big. Just shows you it's going to make a big statement. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if that's ever happened, but imagine a person passing by such a city, and why aren't they building there? That was an Ir Nidachat, and therefore we're never going to build there. Yeah, yes, but here we're talking about if you have a majority of a city, and obviously there are different laws to look at the laws exactly what are the technical laws of this, but majority of the city are idol worshippers, and not only do they get killed, those people that worship the idols, but there's certain laws that the city has to be like, burnt. Whatever, the items of the city have to, of course, the righteous people don't get killed. They didn't worship the idols. But the fact that they lived in such a place, their items are also going to get affected, are going to get burnt, what I recall, because they lived in such a such a place. Okay, so the Mishnah continues. So we're gonna have to see more to address Adam's issue regarding these Ethiopian etrogim. That issue, it sounds like it's because it's a lack of beauty. Okay. Now the Mishnah continues. We just said Vayoruk Kikarti, if it's green like leek. We said Rameir Machshir. Rameir says it's kosher, but Rabbi Yehuda posel. Rabbi Yehuda says it's invalid. Now, if you look on the word posel, everyone see the word posel? There's a little yud on that posel, right? You see that little yud? Adam, you see the little yud? Ralph, you see that yud? The word posel, 4 lines from the bottom in the Mishnah. You heard the posel? On top of the pay, to the right top of the pay. You got it? No, on the word, on the pay of the word posel, there's a little yud. You see the word Rabbi Yehuda? Not in the English, I'm sorry. In the Hebrew, you have to go to the Hebrew section. You see, look at the Hebrew section. I'm talking about the Hebrew inside this section. Over there, posel. The all Hebrew section. There's a little yud. That little yud takes you to the top right corner, which is called the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah. You see the Adam top right corner? Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah. It's the eye of the law. And that's a reference to tell you where is this in the Rambam, in the Shulchan Aruch. This is before any encyclopedias, before internet. There was a rabbi that told you where the statement of the Mishnah is found in Halacha, in the Rambam, in the Smag. He tells you exactly where in the Shulchan Aruch you will find this Halacha. So if you take that Yud, it takes you to letter Nun Gimel, right? You see Nun Gimel? And Nun Gimel says, Nun Gimel, you see it says, the top of the page starts Mem Dalet, Mem Hey. Go down from top to bottom. You got it? You see that, Ralph? You see that, Adam? Top of the page, see Mem Dalet? Mem Hey, right? This is the eye of the law, right? This is the eye of the law. If you look at the as it goes down, where the yud goes to number Nun Gimel 53, where he says Maimin Sham, the Rambam Halacha Ches. It goes on the certain parak that was mentioned earlier, and Torah Shulchan Aruch, and he tells you where it's found in Torah Shulchan Aruch Sham. If you want to know where it's found, just follow over there, and you'll be able to find it very easily. It's a great service that he did for the people. Okay, now the Mishnah continues. Shir etrog hakatan. What's the size of a small etrog? Rameya Omer. Rameya says the size of a small etrog is kishir. It's ke'egos, like a walnut. If it's the size of a walnut, that is the minimum size of an etrog. As long as you got the size of a walnut, you're good. And however, that's not the halacha. Rabbi Yehuda says it is what? Kibeitzah. It has to be the size of a what? Of an egg. And that's going to be the halacha. The minimum size of an egg, it is size, has to be, what do you say? Larger than an egg, right? It has to be large. Egg or more. And our etrogim are all larger than an egg. No, I never saw an etrog that's not larger than an egg. So we don't have to worry too much about this halacha. We got to worry about the green. And
Two hands is still valid.
say it again.
Holding 2 hands.
Right. And then the Mishnah continues. That's about the minimum size. But what about is there a maximum size of an etrog? Right. So that opinion, because this opinion holds that you do not need the lulav. We have a lulav in our right hand and the etrog in our left hand, right? Sfardim, Ashkenazim, by the way, a lefty will take the lulav in his left hand, the etrog in the right, but Ashkenazim, but we hold technically if you would pick up, let's say you pick up the lulav, right, and then you pick up the etrog after, and you put the lulav down, and you pick up the etrog. This rabbi holds you don't have to take it all at the same time, because we have two opinions in the Mishnah. The first opinion says you have to be begadol kadesh yocha shnayim biyoda achat. The first opinion says you have to. It can't be too large. You have to be able to hold two at the same time. That means I have to be able to hold two etrogim at one time. If I can't hold, if it's too big, that it'll be a double. If it'll be two of these, I can't hold it at the same time. Then it would be invalid. It has to be that I have to be able to hold two in one hand. Now, why do I got to hold two in one hand? I have one hand for my lulav and one hand for the etrog, one or two. But sometimes we saw earlier that if someone passes you an etrog and a lulav, and let's say they gave it to you and you picked it up in your left hand, and you got to transfer the lulav to the right hand, so I need to. There's a time period that I might need to hold both at the same time. When I switching hands, and therefore, since I need to hold, I might need to hold both at the same time. And if it's too big, it will drop. There's a concern that the etrog will drop. If it's easy for me to hold it at one time, in one hand, so then there's no, then the etrog, and we know if the etrog drops and the pitum falls off, it would be invalid. So therefore, this rabbi says to ensure that you go ahead and will not have that problem. So the etrog shouldn't be too big. Shouldn't be too big that you can't hold two in one hand. So the first opinion says, be able to hold two in one hand. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi holds. Now, this, according to this would be a rabbinic concern. According to the explanation that we gave, there's another explanation that if it's too big, it lacks beauty. It's just overgrown, and be a biblical invalidation, because we said hadar, the idea that it should be beautiful, is a biblical issue. The issue that when you're moving your hands around that you should have dropped something, that's a rabbinic concern. Okay? Because what's the case? If I by mistake, if I made a mistake and I took the lulav in my left hand, and I got my etrog into my right hand, and I got to switch hand. How do I switch hand? I got one hand, I got the lulav in the wrong hand. And I got the lulav. Let's say I got the lulav in the wrong hand. I got to get this lulav to this hand. I'm going to need to, at one point, I'm going to have to hold two things together to switch hands. Right? Either I go like that, but there was a moment I was holding it with one hand. So now I might drop it. So that's that concern. If I picked it up both like this, if I kept it both in one hand, so therefore automatically I need to have, I shouldn't drop it. If I was given the lulav here and the lulav in the wrong hand, and I switch it, I might drop it. Well, the reason is because of beauty. Rabbi Yossi says that he holds you don't have to take all four at the same time. You could take the lulav, and then you could take the hadassim, and then take the etrog. The etrog could be so big that you could carry it on your shoulder. There's no max. So if I could pick it up, he doesn't hold that you have to have it all simultaneously together at one time, and one in the right hand and one in the left hand. He says, even if it's one etrog that you're going to require, that you're going to need two hands to hold that etrog, it's good. It's still kosher. You still fulfilled your obligation of lulav and etrog. So he holds you do not have to technically hold them together, even though that's how we do it, but he doesn't require. Is that clear? Okay. And as the Chafetz Chaim said, if you have all species, you could take the lulav and then take the etrog afterwards. We don't do that. We take it together. But that's the technical halacha that it would be permitted. Okay, let's take a look. Now, in the Yalkut Yosef from Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, Ravadi's son, in the Kitzur Chanorach, he says, he talks about that if you have a strong green etrog, it would be pasul. But if you know that if you leave it next to certain fruits that have a nicer color, better color, and this would go ahead and turn yellow, then it would be kosher, even if it's green. And but he says, but definitely you should try to have it. You should try to make that should have, you shouldn't just use something it's fully green. Try to avoid it. Or it's better to make the esrog, nice, better color. Okay. Now we're on Lamed Hey Amar Aleph, 35 A. 35A1. Tana Rabbanan. The rabbis taught the following. Pre-Eitz Hadar. Now the Gemara now is going to find a biblical source for the law of how do you know when the Torah says at pre-Eitz Hadar that it means etrog? We know we have a tradition, we have a Masorah from generation to generation, but meaning as the commentary says over here, there was no, in the Masifta Gemara, there was no doubt to the rabbis of the Gemara or the Mishnah that when the Torah says, good morning, when the Torah says you have to create on Sukkot, Torah says you have to take four things. There was no question what you need to take. The Gemara definitely knew that they've been taking an etrog from your time of Yeshua. They've been taking an etrog during the holiday of Sukkot, right? The Torah says, "I want you to remember." Torah says you should take a lulav and etrog. They knew to take an etrog. There's no question that's what they've been taking. But the question is, like the Rambam says, where is it biblically sourced? Meaning, where do we see it in the verse? We have a pasuk. The pasuk says, "Take a pre-Eitz Hadar." But how do we see in the verse itself? If you analyze the verse, could you see in the verse itself that it means an etrog, or is it totally you don't have any hint to the meaning of that it's an etrog, and the only way you know it's an etrog is from the oral law that Hashem gave an oral explanation of the Torah, and Hashem said, what does it mean? Pre-Eitz Hadar, it means an etrog. But you have no way to figure it out. We have no way to figure it out on your own. That's the question. But the Gemara is saying that it is alluded to. You could figure it out you could see from the text of the verse of the pasuk that the word pri Eitz Hadar means that it's referring to an etrog, and that's what the Gemara. But if you take a look at the literal translation of pri Eitz Hadar, it means a beautiful fruit. So beautiful. There are a lot of beautiful fruits. So how do we know that that beautiful fruit is an etrog? Right? Let's say when the Torah says ayin tachat ayin, an eye for an eye, right? You need the oral law to tell you an eye for an eye means the value of an eye for an eye. You would, right? From the verse itself, you might not come to that conclusion, right? And most probably have to think about many verses in the Torah that you would not know the meaning oral law identify. Here the Gemara wants to know, where do we see in the actual scripture, in the verse itself, that we could see it's alluded to an etrog. So the Gemara says, pri Eitz Hadar. The verse states pri Eitz Hadar, a fruit of a tree that's beautiful. And the fact that the Torah says pri Eitz, a fruit of a tree, it could have just said pri Hadar, a beautiful fruit, but it identifies this fruit as a pri Eitz Hadar, the fruit of a tree that's Hadar. So by saying pri Eitz, and not just saying pri Hadar, just a beautiful fruit, there's something unique about this tree, that the fruit that the Torah is telling you, that the fruit, the pri and the eitz, the fruit and the tree have the same taste. The pri eitz, the fruit, if you will eat the fruit, and if you chew on the branch, it'll have the same taste. Eitz shetav eitzo pirya shavat. The taste of the wood of the tree itself and the fruit are the same. Havioma ze etrog. That is etrog. That if you chew on the wood of the etrog, on the branch of the etrog tree, it has that similar taste of the etrog itself. So that's the unique, that in itself is telling us that the pasuk of pri Eitz Hadar is that it's alluding, this word eitz, by connecting the pri to the eitz, to the tree, to the wood, is telling you that the type of fruit that we're talking about is a fruit that tastes like the what? Like the branch itself. And what type of fruit is that? That's etrog. The Gemara is going to ask, isn't there another, peppercorns? The Gemara is going to ask, what about the peppercorns? We'll see about the peppercorns tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Yeah, that similar bitter taste is by both. It's the same thing on the branch. The branch has that same bitter. Send out to the group.